What if the medicine your body needs most is already waiting for you beneath your feet? Hi, I'm Adrienne, and in this episode of Reproductive Rebel, I am joined by John Moro to explore how time in nature, simple, sacred presence among the trees, can quiet chronic stress and bring your body back into harmony. We will talk about the science behind forest bathing, its roots in the East, healing traditions, and how you can bring this ritual into your everyday life, even if you live far from the forest. Take a breath, step outside. Your nervous system remembers the way home. Listen to Forest Bathing for the Modern Soul wherever you get your podcasts. Hi, I'm Adrienne Irizarry. I'm an East Asian medicine practitioner who is passionate about women's health and helping women to live their best lives. My goal is to put you in the driver's seat of your health, offering holistic solutions for a symptom-free life. Statements made in this program are for educational purposes only and not intended as a substitution for medical consultation or advice. We do not claim to diagnose, treat, or cure any diseases. This podcast is inclusive and welcomes all gender identities. The focus of the program is on biological function, and we will use the term women throughout, but it is referencing physiological and social challenges for biology, not identity. Come as you are. I am happy you're here and welcome all performances of identity. I hope you find something helpful in this show. Welcome back to another episode of the Reproductive Rebel podcast. I am joined once again by the incredible John Moro. Welcome back to the show, John.
Adrienne, thank you so much for having me here. I'm glad to be back, and I'm just really eager today to discuss some of the things that have been on our minds, probably all of our minds of late, with relation to health and wellness. I'll just kind of introduce myself briefly for the listeners. So I'm a pharmacist and owner of the Herbal Path Natural Pharmacies. Got a couple locations right here on the Seacoast, and I'm very passionate about holistic health and wellness and helping people live their fullest life. And I think about kind of what's been weighing on people lately, and I see it a lot here in the pharmacy, and we're starting to get to a place where chronic stress coming up a lot. And so I think that the herbs and herbal medicine, that's where I practice, right in that field, have so much to offer people. And our goal at the Herbal Path is really to help empower people to be more involved in their health and wellness and not just passive bystanders. And I think we can have many good conversations about where that might lead someone, but I am very glad to be back and looking forward to a really good discussion today.
Well, if you missed my conversation with John back in season 4, I would highly recommend you check it out. We talked about polypharmacy, which is something that really speaks to a lot of households these days. So definitely listen to that episode and all of John's wisdom. I was so excited and lit up inside by our conversation, both online and offline, that I just had to have him back on the show. John has a wealth of information about all kinds of things. I was telling him just before I hit record that I was like, oh, there's some gems there. I really wish I had hit record sooner, because he is such a wealth of information. And today will be no exception to that. So just before I hit record and all of the many awesome things that we were talking about the state of the world today. And I know that as soon as I say that, like, some of you probably feel tight in your chest. Some of you probably feel a little bit like, man, I am just so overwhelmed and tapped out by everything that is happening, foreign and domestic, because I know I have an international listening contingency. Yes, I am talking about things outside of the United States, but for those of you who are listening inside the United States, like, it's been particularly vibrant around these parts lately. And that is weighing very heavily on many minds and many hearts because of the economic pieces that it's creating, the social pieces that it's creating, dissonances in families, households, and whatnot. So when we hit record on this episode, John and I wanted to talk about chronic stress because this is something that really does touch all of us in some ways, not just because the modern world is moving faster than it's ever moved before, and our nervous systems are, oh, okay, that's a lot to keep up with. Also, we have these additional things that are happening in the world around us right now that are adding to that stress load. And there are actually some really beautiful ways to help your stress load that don't cost anything at all.
And I think that's something that would appeal to a great many people that are listening.
Absolutely.
Because one of the challenges, and we were discussing this earlier with our field, is that there's some great modalities out there, but there is a cost that comes with them.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, mainstream insurance here in the States doesn't cover a lot of these things. But I think, in order to take people on a bit of a journey, there's a level of biology, right, that undercuts all of our discussion today. It's like the undertone. And I think, when you look at stress, we are meant to deal with short-term, intense bursts of stress. That's what our physiology is wired to do. Like, wow, there's a lion, and now I'm going to go run from that lion, and I'm in fight or flight. And then I get beyond the lion, and my body can return to set point, return to balance, or return to homeostasis, right, is what that physiological term means. Unfortunately, we're in an environment right now where most of us cannot escape chronic stressors. So instead of being a lion, it's my ledger, my balance, right? In the bank account, and it's there, or a boss, right? That's asking me to work harder and longer for less. And so that's a stress, or not being able to get food that I need. And that weighs on you around the clock. That's doing to our physiology is fundamentally different than what that lion did. And so I think that's kind of a good way for people to look at it. The chronic stress is what we're really concerned about. We're not concerned about the short-term acute stress, because our body is really good, if we're healthy, at dealing with that. So looking at these chronic stressors, what we need to do is we need to find ways to level up our body in order to meet them, because they're really not going anywhere, unfortunately. So one of the best ways to do that doesn't cost anything at all. And it is going into nature. And I'm sure that your listeners are familiar with walking, on a trail or hiking, and what that feeling is like. And to put it in perspective, I just had a couple of pharmacy students recently, and they're from the conventional medical side, and they were very skeptical when they came into the herbal pharmacy and they're learning about herbs and plants. But I said, guys, we're going to get outside and we're going to go experience one of the most powerful facets of herbal medicine, right? And the Japanese and the Chinese and all of those Asian countries really understand this well. I think in the States, we kind of know, but we don't really understand it as good. But anyway, I take these two students out with me and we go for a walk, and we're walking in a forest. And there's a beautiful forest, close by. I don't know if you're familiar with Vaughan Woods, right? But that's kind of my happy place that we go to. But, in walking there, things are happening. Things are changing in your body, right? You have certain levels of neurotransmitters that are changing in your brain. We're making more chemicals that help us feel good just when we're walking through the trees and breathing in all of that clean air in the forest. We have these chemicals that we're breathing in from plants called terpenes. And those terpenes are doing things not only to our brain and our nervous system, but also to our immune system. And this was really where the pharmacy students were fascinated, because learning about the immune system connection is a whole other level, right? So if we're able to go into the forest, right, and calm down, what is physiologically going on? And we talked about how the Japanese have done research, and there's literature that suggests that our natural killer cells part of our white blood cells, right, are higher from just one forest bathing session per month. So literally just one walk in the forest a month can change our immune system.
Wow.
How interesting is that? And
That's
that was
fascinating.
an hour stroll in a wooded lot. And then they took the natural killer cell levels and they were able to measure that. And so thinking about how that can fundamentally shift our immune system, right, is powerful as well. But also thinking about what is happening in our brain. So the neurochemistry part of it is really how we help to relieve stress. So walking through the woods, breathing in the pine forest, right, or the aromas, and listening to the sounds, and even listening to bird sounds can help to improve our mental capacity, right, and reduce our stress level. So all of these things that are going on around us in the woods, and showing the interns this, it was amazing even to watch their countenance and how their facial expressions kind of changed a bit. For your listeners, pharmacy is a very stressful field. Students are coming from hospital settings and are in a very challenging environment. So going into a wooded area and experiencing that, that's something that doesn't have to be gate kept. Anyone could do that. I could go out there right now and go on a hiking trail and I don't have to pay for that. And I think it's a beautiful thing when people really understand physiologically what is going on in the body. And there's a time-dependent effect. So the more often you do that, the longer you do it, the better it is. And I think when people really grasp that and practice it, just try it. Once a week, go for a walk in the woods. Or once a week, go outside, breathe in the fresh air, right? There's so much more. If you really want to get intense about it, go ground, like take your shoes off and walk on the ground, the bare earth, right? And get that electron transference and exchange. But all of those things you could do without paying a dime. Now, maybe if your listeners are in a part of the world where you have to pay for parking and all that, I get that because I've opened myself up there. But the act of going through walking in the forest for most people is one where you don't have to pay. There's not an economic cost, but there is a wonderful synergy that we can get with nature when we really take time to unplug and dial in. And I think that out of all the different stress reducing modalities, that's probably one of the most profound. And so that would be kind of my top level of recommendation. And it sounds very simple, but connect with the earth, connect with nature, because we're biological organisms. We're meant to have that relationship with the environment. We're not meant to sit in chairs all day on a desk and staring at a computer, on our phone all day, looking at a screen of news feeds that we can't do anything about. And that's the other thing. So the first thing is go into nature. So for recommendation number 1, but recommendation number 2 is to unplug. Consciously, mindfully unplug. When we do that, good things happen in our brain.
Yes.
Look at a phone all day, that is really not helping our mind. And so the two of these things done in tandem is kind of like the super effect, right? Or super physiologic effect of stress reduction, because now I'm focused on the environment around me, which is by definition stress reducing. And I'm not looking at a news feed of various things that I have no control over. For the most part, we can't control world events, right? But they can be very stressful. So these are two things that I talk a lot about, even here in the pharmacy, talking with people, and they're thinking, oh, what herbs should I take? But the reality is there's things we can do. Don't involve ingesting an herb.
Yeah.
That are in some cases beneficial. And then the third thing is, and this is the hard one, prioritizing sleep, like getting a high quality night's rest.
Yeah.
For most of us, again, we don't have to pay for that. That will do wonders to reduce stress. But again, it's kind of like, well, what if I can't sleep because I'm stressed out? And so that's why we need these techniques involved.
Oh, you hit so many good points, John. You essentially described why I spend my entire summer at a campground. We started doing it a few years ago. And I mean, I'm a holistic practitioner. Like, I know all of this at like a cerebral level, right? And we can sit here and we can say this, but my lived experience with my life and my health completely changed when we started camping. And first we had a little tow behind and we went several different places throughout the course of the summer. And it was a blast, but we were outside. The kids, not that we're big device people in our house anyway, but the kids had no choice. The camper was too small. They had to go outside. It was great. I didn't have to fight with anybody. We just simply didn't all exist in the same space quite as comfortably as everybody would have liked. But, you're not staring at the pile of mail that you haven't addressed or the clutter on the counter or the fact that you've wanted to spring clean these rooms and take the curtains down and all this other stuff. You haven't had time to do it, but the fact that it is lingering there is staring you in the face. Like, there's a lot of these little things. Sometimes just clutter is stressful for people. So camping was wonderful for my nervous system and honestly, the nervous system of my whole family. We were able to essentially play together differently, which was so awesome. And to the point where we upgraded our camper and we got a seasonal and a campground, and we literally spend 5 months out of the year living out of our camper because we're outside. The kids are outside. We don't generally sit inside. When we're done with whatever we have to do inside, we go outside, even if that's sitting on the deck. So, if you're not physically moving around, we're still outside. And we have, at the time of this recording, my son is a little over a year old now. And he's now coming on these camping expeditions and he sleeps like a champ. The nights that he's outside all day. And I'm using all of my life as like the anecdotal social proof for what John is saying. But, we were healthier. Like, we really didn't get hit with COVID in our house. We spent the entire summer outside when COVID ramped up. And our immune systems were different. Like, we really didn't struggle. And collectively, we don't struggle. And it's not just because mom is an herbalist, because I can assure you, as any parent that has teenagers, they don't do anything that the parents tell them to do. Even if it's a brilliant idea, when your kids are between 14 and 17, nope. Mom doesn't know anything. So this whole being outside thing really is true. And it's the lived experience in my family, and I see it in that of my clients. But I actually get anxious when we come home in the fall, like the week or two before we have to close up camp. I physically start to get anxious because I know I'm not going to be able to just be outside all the time.
And there's a quietness too.
Yes, there's so much peace there.
I think there's a place that I went recently walking with another herbalist, and she took me to Adams Point, which is a place that I'd not been before, and it's right on the Great Bay, and there's like an estuary there. And so we were walking on the trail, and it was just so peaceful because I didn't hear the road noise or the sound of traffic. Instead, I heard birds and maybe like a splash of water as a bird would land on the water, and looking at all of that, listening to all of that was fundamentally shifting my nervous system. Mm-hmm. Changes that were going on inside, the brain. And all of these neurotransmitters like oxytocin, serotonin, and dopamine, they're being released when we look at these images of the forest, right? And so living in that world, in that very textured reality, our brain is unburdened. We're really connecting with the environment. And I think that it's something that can talk about all we want, but people really need to experience it for themselves. And the good news is they can. And for most folks, they are able to do that. I think that was a great analogy that you used, with the camping and getting outdoors and how it's keeping your immune system up. And this is one of the things that we see, here at the pharmacy, when people start to migrate indoors during the winter, right? And all of a sudden you're in these close confined areas. We're not getting sunlight, maybe our vitamin D level goes down, which is a whole other topic as well. That's when our immune system becomes more vulnerable. And you add chronic stress onto that. So typically, what are we seeing right now? We're seeing a lot of folks coming in for cough, cold, flu, oh, my respiratory system is all messed up and I need help with that. But really helping the immune system kind of is a year-long process, right? And we can't do it right away in that moment. There's herbs that we can take to help manage that situation, but it's more about the long game.
Mm-hmm.
And a big part of that is supporting our body's ability to manage chronic stress.
Yes.
Think of, the imagery when you're walking through the forest and you're seeing various leaves and trees, the colors, the textures, the sounds, and even practicing breathing exercises while you're in nature, while you're in the forest can be very supportive for the nervous system too. And it's funny because when I go to events, right, that my peers are at, and I go to these conventional pharmacy conferences and continuing education events, when I talk about this stuff, sometimes I get a really odd glance or raised eyebrow. At least now there's more of an openness to it.
Yeah.
For a while I was just kind of off by my lonesome at a table because I was so interested in nature and talking about the woods. But my hope is mainstream medicine, as more of this data comes to light, they're going to realize there's a part that's missing in conventional medicine. And in order to find it, we're going to have to reconnect with nature.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough, but we need to reconnect with nature. And so that's a pervading message of what we're trying to do here. But it's remarkable to watch what happens in a person. In a number of the folks that we work with here in terms of clients, chronic stress comes up.
Mm-hmm.
Anxiety comes up. This overthinking things or not being able to sleep through the night because of racing thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Being inadvertently depressed or frustrated by circumstances that are beyond their control. And we try to give them proactive things that they can do. And in some cases, they're not in a position to spend a lot of money on different herbs or supplements or a large regimen. So we have to figure out ways to give them economical recommendations. And one of them always is reconnect with nature. Get out into the forest and walk around, listen, look. And it's nice to see when those folks come back and have a conversation with us saying, wow, that really helped. That made a difference. And for me, that feels good.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's so interesting too that our modern world has gone so far afield from our connection with nature that it isn't something that is a default concept for a lot of people. They're like, what do you mean you want me to go for a walk? I had a client the other day, brand new client, horrible anxiety. And for a lot of reasons, some of it's stage of life, some of it's life circumstances, et cetera, et cetera. But I suggested going for a walk. I was like, even if it's just 10 or 15 minutes, go outside, start with something short and small. But let's start making getting outside a regular part of what you do.
Yes.
And she looked at me like I had three heads because it was such a foreign concept. And yet it is one of the easiest things that you can do.
This is good because you mentioned something there, and I think I would expand upon that. There is a little bit of a fear of nature. And so I've encountered that too with clients, and some of them are incredulous, but some of them are downright fearful. And there was a pharmacy intern that I had, and I keep going back to the interns because, bless them, they're trying hard. They've been taught certain things, and it's like we're trying to help their mindset and all this, but the fear factor is there. And I remember speaking with him, and he was like, okay, so we're going to go for a walk, but, is it safe? And, we were kind of talking about how he was worried about maybe some of the plants that were out there, breathing something in or touching something.
Wow.
He was terrified of going for a hike in the forest. And I'd not encountered that before.
Yeah.
But I had to have a conversation about, we'll go slowly. If you start getting nervous, we can always turn back. And by the end of that walk, he had a grin, had the biggest grin on his face. He loved it. And so sometimes it's helping people get past that fear point. Mm-hmm. It's different. Like you said, it's not what they're used to doing in their day-to-day life. And the same example with herbal tea, because I think another way you can reduce your stress to some extent would be preparing, crafting, sipping on an herbal tea. And that whole exercise is very calming. You're making the tea, you're preparing it with kindness, with intentionality, and then you're sipping on it, right? But the whole act of making a tea, there's some fear around that too. And, I've had folks come in here, and to me, it seems very simple. Okay, brew a cup of tea, help yourself. And, well, is that herb safe? Or is the tea safe? Is it dangerous? And meanwhile, I'm thinking, okay, well, you're on ibuprofen, you're on Tylenol. And these are, if you read the auxiliary labels on there, you would be worried, right? You'd be,
Yeah.
And so it's all about, again, that familiarity piece. So there is a lack of familiarity with some of these things. And we view our role here to some extent as helping people get beyond that sticking point.
Mm-hmm.
Unfamiliarity, that anxiety even about trying something new. People don't like change. They don't like that unfamiliarity. I think in our country as a whole, medicine is a very robotic, dehumanizing kind of process. But we think of medicine as coming in prescription bottles.
Mm-hmm.
Medicine could be environmental. It could be what we're eating, right? It could be things that we do, on a day-to-day level, habits that we have. So all of these things, but a lot of it is overcoming that center of fear or unfamiliarity or anxiety that might be around reconnecting with nature.
Oh, it's interesting you say that. I haven't actually had a client express it that way to me yet, although I should have considered that actually. My kids do Sea Cadets. They are in the United States Sea Cadet Corps, and it's an incredible program. And I remember a couple of years ago, they went to their field training exercise, which was outside. Now, my two girls, I have 3 teenagers. They range from 14 to 17. And my girls, who are the younger two, went to a daycare and preschool environment where they were literally outside all day long. There was no bad weather, only bad gear. And they had a blast. And they don't think anything of it. My oldest one, he is the male of my trio of older kids. And he is like, nope, I am not into this whatsoever. And then they went to this field training exercise. He was the one dragging his heels the most. The girls were really excited about it because they got to be outside all weekend. They were digging their own foxholes. They were outside the whole weekend. Well, when they got there, it was not just their unit that was going to this training exercise. They also had units from Rhode Island, New York State, Connecticut, other parts of New Hampshire, Maine. And the kids from New York, because they lived right in the city, was like, I'm afraid that something's going to eat me in these woods. And so when you were talking about, that's actually what came to my brain, because sometimes it has to do with where somebody's brought up, how familiar they are with something. Maybe they just haven't had exposure to nature and being outside. And so, just like anything that's unknown, there's a fear factor around the unknown. But nature is so therapeutic for people. I brought up my little guy who is just a little over a year old because he doesn't know. Like, nobody has shaped his expectations around what nature does or doesn't do for him or anything like that. And he's happier. His digestion is better. He doesn't get sick. He sleeps better. When he's been outside all day, man, he passes out at 7:30. He sleeps through the entire night.
And so what you're saying, I think, is very important, because when we think about it, children are at that point where they haven't been as shaped by their preconceived notions or by life. And so there's a lack of judgment, right, that exists in their mind. And so that can be a really good thing for them to learn. They're in a phase where their brain is still developing all these active connections, and they don't have all of the judgment that's been passed on by their years of living. And so they're much more able to just suspend that fear, right? Because they haven't built up all these fears and anxieties year over year, and just embrace the natural world. And I would say a big part of what we do here at the Herbal Path really is helping to take down the fear level so people can try some of these healing modalities. Because like you said, it's therapeutic and it can be also less invasive than taking the medication, altering your physiology. You don't have to worry about side effects, right?
Yeah.
Pharmacy students ask me, well, what are the side effects, right, of like going on a hike? And I know, and you and I would laugh, but there are pharmacy interns that haven't done a lot of this activity outdoors. Drinking a tea, drinking a cup of chamomile tea, very calming, soothing type of experience. I've heard from them things like, well, is the chamomile dangerous? Is it going to hurt my liver? What's going to happen? And then we think about what people eat, regardless of herbal teas, but thinking about all the ultra-processed foods people are eating, what's really more dangerous there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And also thinking, too, that when we really start to partake of it, I see the fear start to lift away. So some of it is the exposure, too, because we don't have the mind of a child, right, in that phase. So we have to be open and willing to trying some of this. And then I see their fear lessen. And a great example would be when we have the interns here, we do a essential oil train. And I have them start smelling different essential oils and like telling me, what memories does that smell bring to you? Like, what memories do those cultivate for you? And almost always they start talking about things from their childhood or family, friends, the holidays. And it's a beautiful way to help expose them to plants without them being scared of taking them internally, causing a problem. Because a lot of these plants can relieve stress, but we want to be mindful that the act of taking a plant that you're afraid of could also be stressful.
Right.
So we try to help ease people into it. We view ourselves as a door, right? And I think to some extent you are too, into the world of herbs and working with plants and meeting people where they're at. But I think it's so interesting what you said about the mind of a child and how, again, that fear, that mistrust of nature, it's not there.
Mm-hmm.
Instinct is.
Mm-hmm.
The instinct is for most humans, we're part of the environment, we're part of the world. Let's go interact with the plants.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think that medicine is starting to come around a little bit because you can look at these different, and I always view the Japanese, the Chinese, and then the European Union as being a little bit more ahead in terms of understanding physiologically all the benefits of nature. And I do see we're starting to wake up here, but it just feels like it's a lot slower, a lot more long-term in terms of the journey that we need to go through. But I am encouraged because just a few years ago, I wouldn't have seen this level of openness from other medical providers, and now I'm starting to. And I'm sure you might be seeing the same thing as well.
Yes. Well, and I think some of it is people are questioning more. And so like it's raising awareness with providers. People are looking. I find that a lot of times people are like, I'm looking for a holistic, fill in the blank, whatever the practitioner is, gynecologist, PCP. Like I'm looking for a holistic, fill in the provider's initials, right? And I think since we have come through the pandemic that people are starting to expand their thinking around what health looks like, what health means to them, where they can go for resources around being healthy. And up until that point, I mean, we don't move unless we're uncomfortable, right? It's like the fear of what you know versus what you don't know. Like, obviously, you're going to choose whatever it is that you know versus the fear of the unknowing and the fear of what could possibly go wrong with the thing you're not as familiar with. That's just human nature. And sometimes we have to get really pinchy and uncomfortable in order to move and change our habits. And that happens for a lot of people. I feel like I started seeing that change. My ability to reach the public at large, I felt like shifted during the pandemic. What I was doing was considered woo and weird, in air quotes, beforehand. And then afterwards, more people sought me out for well, what you do, can you help me with sleep? Can you help me with anxiety? Can you help me with, and it was like, yes, I can. And it was beautiful that people started asking those questions. And I feel like now that we're several years removed from essentially how we move through the world completely changing, that there's more openness to consider things that, there's still very much this pill for a symptom kind of mentality. And I'm not saying that we've gotten too far afield from that. But I do think that there is a growing awareness around how the natural world provides supports that our health picture needs. And I think that's important because we are nature. Food is medicine. Movement is medicine. Nature is medicine. And the more we understand that and start to really embrace and step into the truth of that, the more in alignment we become, because disease is dis-ease. There's something out of balance in your body, and you're getting symptoms as a result of that, whatever those symptoms are.
I love what you just said. I think that was a beautiful way of explaining it. Movement is medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And I know from practicing with different people and helping them along in their journey, watching what happens when someone commits to movement or incorporates it in their day-to-day life, and how impactful that can be. Something as simple as going for a walk once a day, a 15-minute walk, can radically shift where someone's head is at. Not just, their physical nature, but also their mental health as well. And
oh, goodness, yes.
I think that this is, again, a very important thing to help people realize. And I would agree with you. I think we're seeing that shift, and it's very encouraging to see it. And there's still an awful lot more work that we need, and sure, we see it day to day. We know it, but it is encouraging to see that it's at least being looked at as a means to help with a given situation. That's a health condition that someone might have.
Absolutely. And to come back to what you were saying about movement too, I think it's really important to bring the movement piece into it, not only because cardiovascular disease due to sitting at desks is starting to become higher and higher on that list of things that harms and kills people, but the other piece of it is, like, when I tell people to go for that walk that I mentioned earlier, yes, I want them to go outside if at all possible. And I recording this, and we live in the northern part of New England. So, we're coming into the part of the year where there is going to be snow on the ground and it's going to be icy and possibly dicey to walk outside. But, even with that happening, being able to just get out and sit on your patio and breathe the fresh air is really important. But the movement aspect of things, like, I'll tell people, go for a walk, but not like you're on a mission to go down to the post office. I would like you to walk and anybody who follows my social media, you'll see occasionally I'll put pictures of pretty foliage on trees or pictures or clouds or, things like this, because it's actually forcing me, and it's a reminder to me, but I'm also including it as a reminder to others to literally slow down and smell the roses. Because when we walk quickly, our nervous system thinks we're still being chased by the stupid tiger. And when we slow down and we smell the roses and we see the birds and we really take in the world around us, that primal brain that is wired for survive or procreate, and that's all that it can handle, survive will always win. So when you slow down and you meander a bit in your walk, we have this very point A to point B. If we're going to go for a walk, it has to be multitask. I got to walk fast enough to lose weight, and I need to get down to the post office, and I'm just going to do both of those things at the same time so that I'm being super efficient.
And that's so allopathic, but you're right. That is absolutely what people think. And I think that was a good call out that I would say from all of the stuff that I talked about. So earlier about that point with the natural killer cells, right? And then being elevated. I didn't specify that this was a very leisurely stroll. These people were not running through the forest. They were not walking at that clip of, oh, I'm urgent, I need to go run an errand or pick up groceries or whatever. It was very much a somatosensory experience. They're walking leisurely. They're breathing in the air. They're looking around. They're very curious, right? Looking around. So all of that was in place. And it very much was not, let me just get from point A to point B as quickly as possible through the woods. And you're right about that you have to help people understand that aspect, that it's okay to go and leisurely look around and stroll around. It doesn't have to be running or even walking at that fast pace, because there's more going on in the mind.
Yes.
When you give that opportunity to slow down.
I'll tell people, don't worry about how many steps you get. Just go and be out there. Like, if you're on your lunch break, because I'll advocate for people, like, if you work at a desk, if you can just go for a 10 or 15 minute walk on your lunch break, you're going to feel your world differently. You're going to see your world differently. And it's even better if you can get that walk outside. If it has to be inside on a treadmill, fine. But I would love for you to do it outside. And I try to keep it small and bite-sized so that it doesn't feel like, oh, I got this really big like life change I have to start integrating into my already too packed schedule. But not focusing on how many steps you're taking, because your little human Tamagotchi on your wrist tells you have not hit your 5,000 or 7,000 or 10,000 steps that day. But you're adding to your step goal. So it's productive no matter how you look at it. But, being able to just be present. There are certain frequencies, like measured in hertz, of different species of birds that have different effects on your nervous system. And listening to the birds is literally sound medicine. Listening to the wind through the trees is sound medicine. Listening to water move and trickle and burble and all of the little gentle sounds that it makes is sound medicine. So being able to slow down enough, even if you have to walk in a metro area on a sidewalk and you hear the cars, try to listen for other sounds, because that is going to keep your brain in that space where you're listening, you're proactively engaging. And so much of our world today is disengaging. We mindlessly scroll on social media. We are trying to do 3 things at the same time and don't hear that our child is trying to show us something or tell us something, because we're trying to do 3 things at the same time. Like, we're oversaturated so much in our culture that being able to take these little pauses and just gently move our body through a really small corner of our day affects our anxiety, affects our stress level, affects our stress load. Like, even in a work building, if you're going from your desk, find the furthest water fountain away from your desk, please, to go fill your water bottle, and then take your time walking back. I'm not saying malinger. What I'm saying is the intentionality around being able to give your body some movement, going across and filling your water bottle. Listen to how the water hits the bottom of the bottle. It's a small little book, The Art of Mindfulness by Thich Nhat Hanh. And he talks about...
Enough said, I love Thich Nhat Hanh. I expect some of his work, so...
Well, it's brilliant. The thing about that book that stuck out to me is he was talking about the mindful act of washing the dishes. And I remember snorting when I read it, because I hate washing the dishes. I hate the feeling of the food in my fingers. I just struggle with it. And whenever somebody else is washing the dishes, it makes me so much happier. But he was talking about...
Right?
Yeah, he talks about how the warm water feels over your hands, and how the soap feels between your fingers, and how the weight of the plate in your hand, and you're paying attention to this very textured mosaic of the experience of something as simple as pouring tea or washing the dishes. And that made a really profound impact on me because I am an Aquarius that lives in my head, and my brain is usually going 6 places at the same time. And this was such a simple concept. And it goes back to this forest bathing idea that not only are we getting the therapeutic benefit from being in nature itself, but we're also getting the benefits of a change of pace and being able to turn our attention in a different way than we typically engage with our day.
And it's taking a very intentional way of doing things. And right about that, living in that moment, as opposed to having the brain jump ahead and attempt to predict the future. And things that can be very centering or grounding for people are oftentimes linking them to the present moment, appreciating the present moment. And I think walking through nature intentionally is a great way to do that. But people can do it in other ways as well. And I think sitting in the silence and sitting in meditation is one way, playing an instrument is another, listening to bird sounds and bird calls is yet another, because it's all linking you into that present moment in time. And in the Persian culture, they have the great poet Rumi. Rumi is a well-known poet, and I am familiar with a lot of his work, but he was very much talking about the present moment and how that is all you know in your life. And so I think too often one of the things that causes stress, and there are many, in our culture, but one of them is being so concerned about the future and things that we may not necessarily be able to control. And I've seen that be a central locus for some of the stressors that are happening with our clients here. And so helping them realize, by going inward in that moment, by being in the present moment, you are in essence kind of taking back some control, control of your mind. And once they start to think about that psychologically, it can really help them and bring down some of that frayed, frenetic energy or the central nervous system. Sometimes our mind can really help us, but sometimes it can also be our worst enemy, as I'm sure you've encountered multiple times. And so helping people learn to shift perspective and think differently, disconnect from their devices and concentrate what's going on in the moment can be very helpful and very supportive. And there's techniques in meditation. Transcendental meditation is fascinating to me. It's meditation that looks more at the physiology of what's happening during meditation. And things like there are certain people that have trained on this meditation that are able to lower their blood sugar.
Wow.
Psychologically. How are you able to lower your blood sugar with your mind? Some of these people can do it. And so I think it goes back to that mind-body connection. Enhance the mind-body connection, you can really start to dial back some of the stress that we encounter day to day. Because stress in and of itself, if you realize this is happening, and then all of a sudden you have maybe 2 or 3 things you can do to help center and bring down the stress, that knowledge, that level of control, the mind loves that and will go, okay, feel a little better. So it's a psychology behind it too. And I think, we're digging into things today that I am very fascinated by. It is the central level of medicine is helping people's thoughts, helping your mind, right? Because there is that mind-body connection.
Absolutely. I could talk to you for hours, John. I love our conversations, and I will have to have you back so that we can talk about some more of these amazing topics because you're such a wealth of information. So if people are looking to connect with you, how can they do that?
Well, there are many ways. One way would be, we're on www.herbalpath.com, so our website. Another way would be pick up the phone, call the stores. We have 2 locations, one in Dover, one in Portsmouth, and I'm usually oscillating back and forth between the 2. But you can also send me an email as well, john@herbalpath.com. But I'm very eager to get to meet new people and try to help them on their journey through the herbal world.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing your time and expertise with us once again, John. I always love talking with you. And until next time, everybody. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Reproductive Rebel. Reproductive Rebel is recorded by certified peri-steam hydrotherapist and acutonics practitioner, herbalist, and Chinese nutritional therapist, Adrienne of Moon Essence LLC. If you are interested in setting up an appointment for one-on-one support, ordering from our store, or checking out our course offerings, visit our website at moonessence.life. Be sure to subscribe to our newsletter and get insider information on upcoming events and offerings. Join the conversation. Like and follow us at Moon Essence Me on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. Your voices make this program possible. Thank you all for your continued support.